when it comes to training athletes, there are a myriad of different exercises that we use, and we're going to continue our series today talking about one that you probably heard a lot about, but you may not know exactly what it means when we say plyometrics. What is it? Why do we use it? Why will we use it for athletes? What's the benefit of it? Well, joining me today again is Charlie Marlowe, our exercise coordinator, talking about plyometrics, not only for athletes, but also plyometrics for life today on the Personalized Fitness Podcast. Hey, good day and welcome to the Personalized Fitness Podcast. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personalized Fitness. Thank you so much for joining me today and joining our exercise coordinator, Charlie, today to talk about a very effective tool that we use with athletes and all of our clients, and that is, of course, plyometrics. Before we jump into it, you see what I did there?
Yeah, I like that, yeah.
Before we jump into it, let me tell you how to get in touch with the show. If you have any questions about this podcast or any others, or any questions that deal with dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, please reach out to us at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personalizedfitness.com. That is also our website and, of course, our Facebook page. Hit me up on Twitter at Team PE if you want to follow us up with us there. So talking about you hear this word thrown around a lot. I hear it thrown around so much that we have parents calling up and talking about, I think my athlete needs this plyometrics, but not really know what it is. But Charlie, this is one of your favorite tools.
Yeah.
So especially working with athletes, tell us what is plyometrics?
Yeah, so I would say if you have a parent calling and asking about that, they definitely do need that. So they're right for wanting that for their kid.
Right.
And yeah, really, plyometrics, the reason it's so important in jumps, medicine balls, throws, things like that, it bridges the gap between the weight room and your sport.
Okay.
And so when you think about lifting weights, we talked about in earlier episodes max strength. You're not really expressing that very often on the field or the court,
right?
But plyometrics is more that fast twitch, explosive, thinking more speed and power, which is more so along the lines of what you would do during your sport. And so, what do we mean when we say plyometrics? We're really talking about sprinting. We're talking about repetitive jumps, so cutting side to side, things of that nature. And during the training process, when you're training plyometrics, we're going to be training those type 2 fast twitch muscle fibers.
Right.
So you have fast twitch muscle fibers, but then you also have slow twitch, which is going to be more of your endurance muscle fibers. They're going to fatigue a lot slower than what your fast twitch muscle fibers would. They're going to fatigue faster, just because they're more powerful. They're going to use more energy as they're working. So that's really what we mean when we're talking about plyometrics.
Right. Right, I got you, and that's that explosiveness, that really you want to talk about sport specific. I mean, plyometric is very much sport specific.
Yep.
It is for the longest time I used to use the term stagnant lifting, and what I meant by that is I'm doing single not complex movements, not really relating it to the sport. And basically, I feel like that's training the body to be stagnant. So, why would you use plyometrics? Let's kind of go into that conversation.
Yeah. So one way that I like to explain it is your tendons are like a rubber band, right? So they're elastic. And so what plyometrics do is they assist the muscle in performing action by using your tendons. So you're actually recycling energy and then redirecting it. So I often say that the best athletes are the ones who are the most efficient movers. Right. And then they're better than others at recycling energy and then redirect it. So let's take somebody, like a wide receiver, Tyreek Hill for the Dolphins. Right. He's a phenomenal athlete, very twitchy. Some might say, he's a really twitchy guy. Yeah. Like, what do you mean by that? Well, he is very well at recycling energy and then redirecting it, so he can cut very fast, and the way he can redirect his foot and plant and go a different direction is a lot more efficient than other people at his skill level are. And so that shows how how advanced and how proficient he is in his movements. Right. And so that's something I often tell the athletes is I'm looking for stiffness. So whenever you go to hit the ground, I don't want you to fold like a wet noodle, like we're not looking for any kind of collapse there. So if an athlete hits the ground and they immediately collapse, I know right off the bat, okay, they're not ready for this, these forces that they're experiencing. So we need to regress and use a more, more basic plyometric before we go on any further.
Right.
So it's really about looking for stiffness in the joints.
Sure.
And it truly just takes, professional being able to look at that and using a coach's eye to be able to notice like, hey, all right, they're not quite ready for this.
Right. Well, you've also got the movement-based training for the brain going on there when you're doing these repetitive plyometric type exercises. So the one of the ones that I love, I've seen you use and a lot of our trainers use, and that's the rebound drill. Dropping off of a block. I'm talking about doing the rebound drill there. And when you talk about reactionary, twitchy, reactionary, that's one of the first things I think about is that particular exercise. So.
Yeah, so that's definitely one that we use a lot, just because it's very easy to tell whether or not this athlete is able to handle the forces or not. And so definitely like a depth drop, reactive jump like that, we use that as well. Right. Really a lot of skips because, again, one of the main things I use plyometrics for is coordination and be able to move your body. And so I think skipping and just hopping in general on one foot is, it's a low-hanging fruit that can really pay off. Yeah,
and that we've spoken about this in a podcast before that the football players that have gone and taken ballet on the off season and they're training their brain as much as they are training their body, and plyometrics does the same thing. Of course, you're definitely, like you say, you're working with the tendons, you're making the body reactionary, what have you, and used to those movements, but it's going to training that entire system to be able to function as one unit, I guess you'd say. So the benefits of plyometrics, though, I mean, where do we see the payoff?
Yeah, so obviously the first two big ones that most people think about is your speed,
right,
and also your power. So, like I said earlier, one of the most intense form of plyometrics is sprinting. It's going to be the most challenging one on your body, and so as we sprint, that we're looking for that stiffness to be able to redirect and recycle force, and so oftentimes the faster somebody is, the better they are at as soon as their foot hits the ground, they're propelling onto the next foot.
Right.
And so there's no lag there. There's no they spend very little time on the ground. If you watch a elite sprinter like Usain Bolt, his stride length is incredible. It's really awesome to see because he's floating through the air, right? I mean, like he's launching himself forward and he's spending very little time on the ground. And so, obviously increasing speed and then increasing power. There's different ways that you can program plyometrics to where one might be where you're having less amount of ground contact time, which means you're spending less time on the ground.
Sure.
Those are going to be more for speed. And then the ones that you're spending a little more time on the ground, those are going to be more for power. So
I got you.
There's different ways that you can modify the intensities.
Sure.
And then also, like I kind of mentioned earlier, is coordination and also body awareness. So just being able to know where your body is in space. I think a lot of our athletes in our youth development / early high school elite age are really needing, they're learning their bodies, they're going through that puberty stage, and so they're trying to learn like, all right, where's my body at in space? I'm growing at a fast rate, so I need to be able to learn how to move this changing body. And so being able to incorporate plyometrics into our program, I think, is a good way to kind of help them explore this growth, and then it as they continue to progress, we can increase the intensities.
I think that plyometrics is a good way to work with what we refer to a lot of time is and is commonly said about kids that are growing when they hit a growth spurt, they go through that quote unquote gangly stage. I mean, I can never forget. It's one of the best basketball players that ever came out of my high school. Watching him from like 7th, 8th grade just look goofy on the court. Well, he had a major growth spurt. And what Charlie's talking about there is that you're take a somebody that's a hulking 5'6" like myself, and take that brain, that's an athletic brain that knows how to move this body and what have you. Take that brain, especially that cerebellum, and put it into 6'4".
Yeah.
the reaction time, the it's not going to know how to function that. And that's what Charlie's talking about, is training, basically learning how to work that body. Also, that when you're talking about, we're talking about growth stages, but quite often you and I speak about LTAD, LTAD and long-term athletic development. Don't you think this is an effective tool for up and down the spectrum in long-term athletic development, especially even with young kids?
Oh yeah, most definitely. So, like we said in the LTAD series before, the last stage of LTAD is to training for life, right? And so that last stage of, all right, whenever you're done competing in a sport, now we're just training for life to be able to live our life to the highest quality possible. And so that's something that I definitely incorporate, and we all do in our training, is plyometrics, especially, in the warm-up to kind of prime the nervous system to get them ready to, take on the rest of the session.
Sure.
Med ball slams, a lot of that we do with several of our clients. I mean, I've got a client that I train, and she's in her 80s, and we do box jumps on the regular, and she loves it. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people get confused about, or they might just not understand, is once you stop playing on the playground and going out with your friends when you're a kid, that doesn't mean you have to stop doing these type of movements and stuff. And a lot of it is due to lack of just time. People don't prioritize that, but then as we get older, we start to see the negative effects of not doing those things.
And we see it not because time passes on the calendar. We see it because we stop doing those things.
Right, it's just a lack of doing it.
Period. And you're talking in my territory, the far end of LTAD, long-term athletic development, training for life. And I was speaking about Charlie before the podcast and talked about an incident, like you have your 80-year-old the lady that you're working with that's doing box jumps. Had a gentleman in his early 70s and incredibly strong. Step ups with 15, 20 pound dumbbells. He's stepping knee just above the hip stepping up on a box. And I wanted him to do some box jumps, some really low box jumps, and he wouldn't do it. He would just basically refuse to do it. So I lowered it down all the way down to a 3-inch box, to a 3-inch pad, a mat, wide mat, and he would jump one foot than the other one, and I knew he had the strength. And finally I just stood him on the mat and said, why don't you just jump up in the air? And I realized something. I learned something. This was years ago, and I learned something right there. He had developed a fear of both feet being off the ground. Whereas as a kid, I'm sure he was skipping, I'm sure he was jumping, I'm sure he was running. And when you run, both feet are off the ground at some point in time. You're launching your foot. So that's the beginning stages. That fear is the beginning stages of teaching yourself to fall. And so, but go on the other end of the spectrum. Since you played my territory, when you first at the beginning of LTAD is play, right?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Exposure to as many movements as possible. We call that physical literacy. So being literate in all things physical movement. Right.
Well, something as simple as what you were saying a minute ago that you used with athletes. Skipping. That's a form of plyometrics. Jumping rope.
Jump rope's a great form of plyometrics.
Another form of plyometrics. So
and this is also another misconception that we can touch on is, there's a lot of debate about, how old does my kid need to be before they start lifting weights, right?
Right.
And some people will say, they need to at least be in high school. They need to at least be past puberty.
Sure.
And, I would argue in the research supports that if a kid is, jumping off a swing set and they're landing on the ground, their body is experiencing more force through that landing than it would be squatting with a 20-pound dumbbell, right? And so if they're doing those things on the regular at the playground, playing with their friends, jumping out of trees, then they're more than capable of doing a resistance training program. And so that's why, our earliest age that we start with is 8, 8 to 10, that range right there. And that's in our fundamentals range where it's a lot of play. It's a lot of learning, different positions and things like that. But as far as like age for resistance training, I mean, if they're old enough to play on the playground, I think they're old enough to lift weights. Look at
the argument. Okay, we hear that quite often, and there's a question about that. And probably to me, the worst part of it is, I read somewhere. Okay, I wish they hadn't. Most likely you read it from somebody that didn't have the background and the experience. But at what age is it okay for a kid to jump up there and land? I mean, that's something that's never questioned. Think about it. We celebrate it when it happens. Exactly. Exactly. Well, that impact, that's what you're talking about. that kind of impact is they're going to experience less impact actually doing a controlled lift. But that impact is so important for development.
Yeah.
And so which is back to the importance of plyometrics and what have you. So
yeah, and I mean, I would say, for the parents out there, if your kid is doing these things and they're experiencing these, these forces and these landings in sport and in their play, then, why would you not want them doing it in a controlled setting with a professional who can guide them and say, oh, well, you're not quite ready for this. Let's put you through this exercise. Let's put you through this drill. Because that's when they're really going to learn, and they have somebody who's able to direct them and guide them along the right path. Because a big thing that plyometrics is really beneficial for is injury prevention.
Sure.
So you're getting those tissues, the muscle and the tendons acclimated to those forces. So whenever they are playing at max capacity and they're going all out, their body is more prepared for those situations. And so that's really all training is to get you ready for that. And so that's one of the main reasons we program plyometrics, is because you're going to be experiencing that a lot in sport. The
vast majority of the training that we do is for prevention.
Yep.
I mean, it is largely prevention, and like you said when you were talking about LTAD, the need for that to continue. So even beyond the athletic field, so that we don't develop these, we don't have those tendencies for that injury, because we haven't been training those muscles and training those tendons and what have you. So this is a big topic. Now, I was talking to Charlie about this when we first talked about doing plyometrics in this series, talking about exercises, that we really, we could pick exercises, but we needed a good overview on what plyometrics is. But we are going to follow this up with some of our favorite plyometric exercises and how we incorporate those into the program. So I think Charlie just found out what his homework for the next few weeks. So, but
yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So I appreciate you being with us, man. And listen, if you had more questions about this podcast or any others, or if there's a particular exercise that you want to know about, why would we do this with athletes, or should athletes be doing this? Reach out to us, area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also contact us at my email, which is Garrett, Garrett, @personalizedfitness.com. Charlie is Charlie @personalizedfitness.com. And that's our website, our Facebook page. Hit us up on Twitter or X at Team PE, talking about plyometrics, this explosive, fantastic exercise technique.
Yeah.
That we use functional training for athletes and for life. And one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Charlie, thank you for being on the show. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.